From what comes in the wake of the Forever Canadian petition being certified, to questions over the future of the Recall Act and First Nations perspective on the Alberta-Ottawa Pipeline MOU. Time now for tonight's politics panel, and joining us this evening, Mount Royal University political scientist Laurie Williams and Don Hill, co-founder of the blog Beyond Polarity and a longtime broadcast journalist in Alberta. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the referendum conundrum facing the Smith government now that the Forever Canadian petition has been certified by Elections Alberta as being successful. Laurie, we heard from the petition's lead proponent, former Deputy Premier Thomas Lukaszuk. How tricky a position does this put Danielle Smith and her caucus?
Well, we're seeing at the AGM over the weekend that there is a significant contingent within the United Conservative Party and they're at the AGM that are determined on separatism. They're well organized. They did get some people on the UCP board, though not the majority. I think that these competing pressures, obviously around staying in Canada or some form of independence, that's one of many tensions within the party. They're the libertarians and the social conservatives and the moderates and the those that are further to the right. It's a very, very difficult bunch of people, and they're quite animated. So the problem is, as these questions get raised and answered, the frustration of those who don't feel like their voices are being heard grows. Their energy, their mobilization increases, and it makes it much more difficult for Danielle Smith to hold the party together. And frankly, the more the demands are made on the, I'll call it the right fringe, although I don't know that separatism necessarily has much to do with the left-right bit. But the more she moves in that direction to placate the folks she's trying to keep from splitting at the right flank of the party, the more she risks losing moderate Albertans. I mean, some of the things that Albertans saw over the weekend have caused deep concern, and I'm not sure what route, if any, is available to Danielle Smith to quell that. It may be that people decide they want to vote for someone else entirely.
Don, on that point of concern, where do you weigh in on this being a pivotal juncture in the history of Alberta politics, especially given the degree of support that Laurie was referencing there, shown for separation on the floor of the UCP AGM?
Well, I'm going to unpack a lot of the conversations that are already happening. Thomas Lukaszuk was absolutely correct. Families are being divided about this. In some cases, they can't even talk to each other. And I think it's largely because there are different narratives in play right now. That's what's got me really concerned. As a person, as we would call way back when, BS baffles brains, social media doing what social media can do in a nutshell. Do you turn left or right if you see something coming at you and you haven't got time to make a decision? And I'm also worried about, and I am worried about this, is in terms of the narrative, a lot of people are being put into a position where they're being emotionally engaged. And the last time I saw that happen, and I had colleagues working in the theater space in the United Kingdom, and I had the pleasure of working with them. And then David Cameron, at the time, thought he would once and for always get rid of this question of whether they should leave Europe or not. And at the time, like a Thomas Lukaszuk, it looked like most people in the United Kingdom preferred to stay in Europe. Until a group of people who knew how to animate a message, change the narrative, change the channel, work on emotions, and the next thing you know, you've created the conditions, Thomas Lukaszuk, for putting a yes-no question in front of people, and we don't know what those emotions will look like 6 months from now. We do not know if we saw earlier this week the First Nations getting together through their assembly and saying no to anything that Alberta could possibly propose about this memorandum of understanding. In other words, we've set things up for a yes-no question that might blow up in our face. Thanks a lot, Mr. Lukaszuk.
Well, Laurie, how quickly do you expect the government to move on making a decision here? Is the clock ticking?
Well, I mean, they've got some options here. They can decide how they want to proceed with this, and they may decide to proceed to an election to evade dealing with this. There is a real danger, of course, of deeper divisions being created as a result of this. But I'm going to somewhat disagree with what Don said there, and in that the referendum question was coming from the Alberta Prosperity Project. It's being reviewed in the courts, but they were ready to go with this. Somebody was going to ask the question. It was just a matter of which question would be the one that was asked and whether we actually went to a referendum or potentially could deal with this within the legislature. So I think Lukaszyk's strategy was meant to keep this from going to a vote, and the kind of thing that Don is worried about, whether that's avoidable or not, that's I guess up to the government. If they decide to go ahead with a referendum rather than a vote in the legislature, then some of the concerns that Don has raised might emerge. But there are a lot of folks in Alberta that, I mean, let's remember that in the UK, a lot of the argument was centered around economic issues, people worried about losing their jobs and that sort of thing. And we don't have that element for the most part in Alberta. The business community, the folks that are involved in industry and so forth, all see the advantages to stability and remaining within Canada. And I think obviously there are disagreements between the business community. We saw the standing ovations for Mark Carney last week, and then we saw the boos for Danielle Smith over the weekend. We know there are divisions, but again, I think there is an option for dealing with this through a vote in the legislature to try to diminish it. And to my mind, what Lukaszuk was trying to do is to at least present a route that would be less divisive, less destabilizing. And then it's up to the government how they deal with it. I mean, Danielle Smith is without question in a really difficult spot, but she does have at least the option of that vote in the legislature and avoiding deepening the divisions that are out there in the community.
Okay.
I know we have to take a break.
Real quick.
But
Go ahead,
Laurie, just a second here. This is all very logical, what you're speaking to, and I get it, right? But we're not talking logic here. It's emotional. That's what's got me most concerned. Mr. Lukaszuk was working on emotions throughout the summer. I know how this stuff is made, and I think you do too. Is the problem? No. This has become emotional.
You're making good points and raising good concerns. But I just think Lukaszuk tried to take a route that would be less divisive, less destructive. We'll see if it works.
Okay.
Or was he looking for a job? Sorry, Michael.
Could be.
That's what I'm trying to get
very
at.
well.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to shut up now.
There's a hypothesis around that as well. Okay, you know what, folks? We've gone a little bit over on this one. So how about we take a bit of a break now? But when we come back, we'll talk about the Recall Act. Welcome back. The Smith government is looking at changes to the contentious Recall Act, but maybe not as early as anticipated.
We think that it's being weaponized by special interest groups to try and overthrow a government. That's not the intention of recall. It never was the intention of recall. But I can further say that those changes are being contemplated. They will not appear as part of any bill this session.
In response to a recall question Monday, the Premier indicated the government would be introducing election legislation Thursday, prompting speculation about changes to the Recall Act. Elections Alberta has approved recall petitions for 14 UCP MLAs, and more are anticipated, including one launched against Danielle Smith. Don, I'll start with you first this time. So nothing apparently in the current sitting, according to the Justice Minister there, but surprised the government would actually contemplate changes to the Recall Act now that all of these petitions are up and running?
Well, first off, let's just speak to the obvious here. And people are saying, oh, no, this has not been, this has nothing to do with public service unions. This has nothing to do with special interests. This has nothing to do with the NDP. And this has nothing to do with the NDP, for example, engaging a new advertising agency that got an elected member in New York City when that was not supposed to happen. So what's going on here? Again, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. This is about manipulation. And I don't know if and when in the legislature this can be dealt with accordingly. The initial conversation that people were having, if you have a crazy person, MLA, who's been convicted of drug abuse or something like that, then there's the right of recall. But what this all looks like right now is harassment, and that's how we say things in Canada, harassment, by the way, and not harassment, which is happening because of agitators from the outside who are trying to distract our legislators from doing their job. This is a very important time in our country, let's face it. We've got probably the best prime minister, conservative prime minister the Liberal government ever had, who's trying to mend fences and bridges and all this kind of stuff. And all these guys are doing, adding oil to the fire, so to speak. So I don't know what the government, our government, the legislative government assembly in Alberta can do, but they have to do something to get rid of these distractions.
Laurie, if there are to be changes, where do you see debate heading over intention of the original act and the stance the Smith government is currently taking? We heard the Justice Minister there in the clip.
Well, I think it's important to understand that there are cases where recall does make sense. If a candidate has misled people in some fundamental way going into an election, if they have committed a serious ethical or legal breach, those are the kinds of things that most people think recall should be involved in. Simply trying to redo the election, that's not supposed to happen. I'm a bit concerned about the fact that the same people that are saying this is not what recall is supposed to be didn't say any of those things when it was directed against Jyoti Gondek. I hate to see this becoming partisan. I do think the legislation needs to be set up in such a way as to at least outline broad criteria for what would constitute grounds for recall. But some would argue that when you have a fundamental change in policy, the use of the notwithstanding clause is what some people are looking at in this context. They look at potentially vulnerable people. Most of this is going to be symbolic. Let's be clear. The thresholds are very high. I think there might be a chance of actually succeeding at the first step of this recall process in Demetrius Nikolaidis's riding, both because he's education minister associated with mishandling of the teachers' strike and the notwithstanding clause, which lots of people have serious questions about. Those questions could sort of come to a head in that particular riding. There's one other one, it's Nolan Dick in Grand Prairie, because there was such a low voter turnout. He needs just about 9,000 votes to trigger the recall in that particular riding. Most of these aren't going to go anywhere. They're mostly symbolic. And even in those ridings where it might be close, again, close races last time around, potential for a grassroots campaign. But even if that's successful, then there's a vote on whether to recall them. And then if there is a vote to recall them, then there's a by-election. I mean, there's several steps in this. And the government doesn't need to change the law today in order to avoid losing all of these seats, but they do need to change it to try to limit the expense that's associated with it and some of the questions that are being raised about whether this is the kind of thing that recall should be used for.
Okay, Don, you're going to get last word on this one. If it is that Premier Smith is facing a recall petition within her own Brooks Medicine Hat riding, how does that change the whole recall conversation?
Well, it certainly puts, now I echo what Laurie was saying earlier in our conversation today, is it puts the government in a position of maybe we should just call it an election. And again, as I said before, emotions are in play right now on both sides of the line. And when emotions collide, bad things can happen, and it won't be good for the province. So if we're heading into an election come this spring or sooner, think about that. What's in play right now? We've got a memorandum of understanding with Canada at the point that has already been kiboshed by the First Nations meeting of their annual gathering, saying we're never going to do this. 600 plus people have basically say no, 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 no. That adds a lot of fuel to the separatist flames. Just letting you know, I am nervous about this, and now I'm going to go away and have a whiskey or something.
Well, all right. Well, on that note, we are actually out of time. We do have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Good to hear from you. Thank you.
All right. Happy Christmas.